Assalamu alaikum, everybody. This is Imran Namlawala from A Continuous Charity, and I'm very excited about this webinar and presentation we're going to have today, the COVID-19 stimulus, understanding how the new laws affect your family and business. We're going to be discussing assistance for individuals, aid for small businesses, and how everyone can get access to their benefits. We have two very amazing individuals on the show today. Naveed Husain, attorney, a managing partner at Farooqi and Husain LLC, and Ausaf Farooqi, business consultant, director of MyShura LLC. Brothers, how you guys doing?
Assalamu alaikum, doing well.
Alaikum
Alhamdulillah.
salam.
Alhamdulillah, doing good.
Alhamdulillah. I wanted to firstly thank you guys for this amazing service and webinar that you're providing. I saw that you provided it a couple of days ago and how timely it is. And it's amazing that there's this amazing grant that is being offered to us, but a lot of us do not know how to access it. So again, thank you for explaining the benefits and explaining how all of us can access and reach these benefits, which are, again, going to help many people. So
thank you.
You're welcome. Before we go into the bread and butter of this presentation, can you guys give a small introduction of yourselves and explain your roles in the companies you're involved in?
Ausaf, please go ahead.
Okay.
All right. So my name is Ausaf. I'm director of MyShura. So what MyShura is basically a consulting and mediation practice. I spent about 10 years as an attorney. Finally decided that I wanted to try to approach the problems in the community from a different angle, mainly mediation, but also some consulting work. So I left the practice of law, retired my law license, and have started this practice where primarily what I do is I'll either sit down with people who are in the middle of a fight and work out their problems amicably, or I work with individuals and businesses to get past whatever problems they may have or get in front of those problems before they even occur. So that's essentially what the work I do is.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So yeah, my name is Naveed Husain. I'd like to first thank Imran and Continuous Charity for inviting us. You know, it's definitely a very important topic that needs to be addressed. So I started practicing law about 10 years ago. I never thought that I'd be a family law attorney. I actually started my practice as a business attorney, but kind of based off the need of the community, it's really pushed me to do family law and estate planning. And so now what I really try to concentrate on is kind of the connection between Islamic law and American law, especially as it deals with divorce and estate planning. And also in those two areas, it's very important to understand how business law works. So I think that my initial exposure as a business attorney really is helping my practice as a family law attorney and estate planning attorney. And even, you know, the clients that I had initially, I'm still serving them. And, you know, I kind of service business clients from word of mouth, and I'm kind of pushing the family law side of things. So that's kind of what brings me here.
And just since everything that's gone on since COVID-19 has started, from a practicing standpoint, what have you guys noticed? What type of situations are arising in the last 3 to 4 weeks?
Yeah, from my side, so you know, as like a family law attorney, for example, all the courts have been closed, and so the litigation is kind of at a standstill. And really, what that has done for my practice in specific is really ramped up the estate planning side of things. And so now you see people trying to do their wills, trying to do their trust, their healthcare powers of attorney on one side. And then on the other side is businesses reaching out to really understand how the CARES Act is going to apply to them. And that's why me and Ausaf actually decided to hold the initial webinar that we did on Thursday.
And go ahead, Ausaf.
I was going to say, you know, a lot of my work is similar to that. So, you know, a lot of the mediation I do is two couples getting divorced. And I'm trying to work out their divorce in a more amicable fashion. The end goal is still going to be divorce, but we try to, you know, incorporate more Islamic elements, or if we're, you know, if both parties don't want anything to do with that, just want to go by whatever their rights are, we try to work that out that way. But because the courts are closed, because everyone's sort of peeling back a little bit, there hasn't been a lot in terms of individuals coming in for mediation. But what I have noticed, and this is really common, is that when there are outside circumstances, outside sort of disasters that come at us, they start to trivialize a lot of the things that may drive us apart from within our own homes. They put things in perspective for us. So I've noticed that a lot of people, where they were very urgently trying to just get away from their spouse or just deal with get in the middle of a fight, they're kind of taking a step back and they're saying, well, okay, well, let me just think about things a little bit. Let me just slow things down here, which is really important because, part of the work that I do as a mediator is I want people to do something called divorce planning, which basically means don't rush to get divorced. If you want to get divorced, you'll get divorced eventually. But let's try to plan out what your lives are going to be like post-divorce. Let's try to be reasonable about this and think about it. And I feel like when you have such an external crisis, it makes people want to think more about what they're doing as opposed to being very reactive. So I found that very interesting. But then the other side of it is just this whole e-interfacing through teleconference and things like that, and the way that we're able to connect more effectively. In the past, I wouldn't do mediations this way because it's very easy for somebody to say, you know what, I don't like what you're saying, and they hang up the phone, and then that's it. The mediation's over. But I found that because this is the forum where people are getting more used to communicating, people are a little more reluctant to do that. And I've been able to work around that and use that to make my work a little easier.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that explanation. And I know you guys on that token, you have, before we get into this presentation, you guys have another webinar tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So, based off of the demand of estate planning, I thought it'd be prudent to do a little presentation on estate planning, and not only the technical legal aspects of estate planning, but kind of zooming out and really discussing how what Islam has to say about estate planning and kind of the discongruence between American estate planning and Islamic inheritance rules. And so, we wanted to have a broad conversation about that. We'll cover the technical things, but I think it's going to be a more interesting discussion about the interfacing of Islamic law and American law. And
when is that exactly tomorrow, and where can we watch it?
Sure. So that's tomorrow, Sunday at 2 p.m. And that'll be live on our Facebook page, Farooqi Husain, Farooqi Husain.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin this presentation, and we're going to cover what the stimulus is, who can apply, and how to apply. So I'm going to hand over the reins to you, brothers, inshallah, and we can begin.
Inshallah.
All right, inshallah. So this was the PowerPoint presentation that we actually went through on Thursday. So there's some parts of it that we've already talked about. Going to the first slide here, who we are. We talked about exactly who me and Naveed are, what kind of work that we do. If anybody has questions about that, just reach out to us and contact us. We don't need to go too deeply into that. So I think before we get into the stimulus package and before we get into what benefits we have at the federal level or at the state level, I think it's important to kind of keep in mind what are the lessons that we can learn from being in this situation in the first place. For me, it's been a period of great reflection. It's been basically what I would describe as a pause button on life, because before this, every single day you're getting up, you're jumping right into the grind. You're not even thinking about what you want to do. You're just worrying about what I have to do today. And what you have to do ends up being this massive list that you never get through to the end. And all of a sudden now we have a pause button. What we have to do may still be there, but we can't do a lot of it. So we're forced to take a step back, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, whether it's a situation where you can take a step back and relax, or you can take a step back but you're stressed, but you still are in that state of incapacity. And I found, at least for me, and both of you can chime in as far as whatever you've learned from this, is I've learned 6 really important things. The first thing I learned was that whenever these situations change, business changes. And if you look at how every business is working right now, they're looking to do things more remotely. They're looking at more convenience. We're talking about quicker deliveries of groceries. We're talking about curbside pickups, perhaps a reduction in the brick and mortar stores. So it makes you think, where will society go from here as we get used to the conveniences that are created because of the crisis? So for your own business, you need to look at that and say, okay, I have to find ways to innovate, to refine, or my business might become a dinosaur because this crisis is stimulating change in society. The second thing that I think is really an important note is the idea that we have to prepare in advance. And what I mean by that is there's this old Chinese proverb where if you want to do the impossible, you have to do it when it's possible. And that might seem incongruous because we're thinking to ourselves, well, you can't do the impossible. It's impossible for a reason. But what they're trying to say by this is, the example I use is that, say I want to go play center field for the New York Mets. If I'm going to play center field for the New York Mets now, I'm approaching 40 years old, that's an impossible goal. It's never going to happen. But had I had that goal when I was 15, 14, 12 years old, and I dedicated my time and my efforts solely towards that goal, then it may have been a possible goal because I was working on it when it was possible. So fast forward to now, there's a lot of things that are impossible right now. If your job is being a waiter and you've been making your living that way, that job is now impossible. So what you want to learn from here is that you need to plan and try to accomplish those goals you want to accomplish and plan ahead. I think that it's important to remember that this is a new normal situation. I don't think things are going to go back to the way they were. I think that we're talking about a very changed society after this, and we have to be prepared for that. We have to accept something that as Muslims, we should already know, that we don't have a lot of control over our lives, that we think that we're in control and that we can do things and we can plan for things. But one little bug that came out of a market 10,000 miles away has cost 17 million people their job in this country and grinded industry to a halt. And if that isn't a clear indication that you really aren't in control, I don't know what is. So when you're not in control, you need to plan, you need to have contingencies, you need to assess your risk, and you need to make sure that you're doing what you can to get past even these unexplainable situations. And the last two things I think are really important, especially for us as Muslims, is that we're realigning our values. We're home with our families more. And that should make us think about, that kind of environment, not having that constant hustle and bustle, but maybe thinking about having a better work-home balance, and getting in touch with our mortality. Naveed had mentioned a lot of people coming to him for estate plans. And I find that interesting because when I was practicing before, we would get estate plans usually at two times. One, someone's going overseas, and two, someone's going to Hajj. Because evidently for a Muslim, these are the only two times we're worried about death. We're traveling overseas, we're going to Hajj. That's when we're going to die. So that's when I'll get my will done. And now we're having this influx because, again, people are getting into their mortality. But our mortality is the same every single day. And it's something we just have to remember and kind of keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, in terms of lessons that I've learned from this whole situation is, first of all, this whole, conversation that people have been having about, is this a, punishment? Is this something else? I think that that's not really what the focus needs to be. I think for, obviously this has caused some people to lose their jobs. People are worried about how they're going to pay their next bills. And so I think at an individual level, we each need to take the opportunity and take the time to actually reflect on how this is going to impact us as individuals, and forget about, the zoomed out view of, punishment versus whatever else has been going around. And I think really that for me personally, it has been a moment of reflection, just like Ramadan comes in and kind of changes your routine to kind of wake you up. In that same way, for me, this pandemic has kind of, took me off my routine and has really woken me up to, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And kind of being more intentional in what I do. And so, in terms of the lessons that Ausaf has listed here, innovate, refine, or die, as an attorney, we're kind of stuck in the, stone age as it relates to how we do things, right? The court system, you have to travel 30 miles to show up to court for 5 minutes and you go home. There's no sense of using telecommunication, for example. However, in this climate, we've really had to take advantage of technology. We're doing consultations over Zoom now. We're doing estate planning signings over Zoom as well. So, I've taken the opportunity to really bring my firm to the forefront of technology and to innovate, because I know that if I just shut down my doors, until the state opens back up, my business is gone. Also, as it comes to realigning our values, as a family law attorney, I see families crumbling day in and day out, and I think that as a society, this is giving us the opportunity to really focus in our houses instead of outside of our houses, right? And I think that if we're able to bring that sakina and that peace in our house, then I think that inshallah, that's going to be kind of the reset that we need to make the society peaceful. And then in terms of getting in touch with our mortality, like Ausaf mentioned, I mean, I've gotten more estate plans requests in these last 2 weeks than I have in the last 6 months. And I think that it's a great time. It's not something bad, and I don't fault anyone for it. I think it's a great opportunity for us to really, realize that we're not in control. Life is short, and we really need to make the most of it.
Great job, brothers. I think, just to summarize that, this is definitely going to be the test of our time, our generation. But even in this situation, so many positives have emerged. As you mentioned, we have to be more innovative. We have to figure out how we can leverage technology to keep going, to keep our businesses afloat. And I think, one of the things that has come to the forefront is people may start becoming more health conscious. They may also start being more concerned with how we treat the environment, how we interact with the environment. So I do see this situation transforming a lot of different industries for the positive. But again, thank you guys for this great summary.
Inshallah. So, the thing to really keep in mind here is, how do you come out of this crisis stronger? And I think that's really what it comes down to. As Naveed had mentioned, there are aspects of this where we feel like it's an adab, it's a punishment from Allah that He's putting this upon us. But at the same time, I think that you can look at this as there are ample opportunities created because of this. As I mentioned, that idea of a pause button. So now you can actually take a step back and think about what you really want to do and how you want to pursue it. The stimulus package, of course, is another thing where there's a lot in this package that can help you either grow your business, help your business survive during this time, or even allow you to take that step back and figure out what's the best thing for you moving forward. So I've listed some of the programs here. There's 10 things listed here. This isn't really an exhaustive list of every single benefit. There are other state benefits that are available. There are other smaller benefits within the federal government that are available. So don't take this as an exhaustive list, but these are some of the main aspects that you want to be aware of, because they apply broadly to a lot of individuals who are going through this situation. So for small businesses, we want to look at the Paycheck Protection Program, the EIDL loan advance, the SBA, which is a small business association, their Express Bridge loans, their debt relief program. We want to look at what the Families First Coronavirus Response Act does, and we want to see what tax benefits were put in. For individuals, we're going to look at the unemployment benefits. We're going to look at a couple of things with student loan deferments. Obviously, one thing with individuals, I think this is sort of the most well-known aspect of the stimulus package, is the direct payment. And we're not really going to go over the direct payment. For many people, they've already received. But essentially what that is the government's going to cut you a check directly to you based on your income. If you are filing single as your tax status, your income is less than 75,000, you get the full 1,200. If it's between 75,000 and 98,000, it starts to come down a bit. At 98,000, you don't get anything. If you file head of household, it's 112,000. That's the threshold before it starts to come down. And if you file married filing joint, it's 150. And then after 150, it'll start coming down until you get to 198. And at that point, it phases out. And if you have a child, it's $500 per child. So that's a very commonly known thing. I don't want to go too much into that. And it's going to come to you automatically. So it's not something that you have to actually go out and seek. These other aspects, you do have to go out and seek. There's two things I wanted to mention that are on this screen. I want to go over them really quickly right now. One is the loans and your employer. You might be an employee and you might be saying, okay, well, you know what? I don't have a business. I don't need to know about what's good for small businesses. I work a 9 to 5. I do my time. I get my paycheck. Let me know what's for the individuals. And for that person, I'm going to say you want to pay attention to what's for small business for two reasons. One, if you've lost your job or if your job's in jeopardy, maybe it's time to start thinking about what I can do in terms of being my own boss. Because being your own boss is the easiest way to avoid being unemployed, because hopefully you don't fire yourself. But the second thing is in communicating with your employer. If you know what benefits your employer has available to them, and you know what they're able to do with those funds, then if they're telling you something different than what benefits you know they are receiving, that's going to help you in your conversations with your employer. That's going to empower you in your workplace. So you do want to know about those things because they're important to you. And maybe your employer doesn't know about it. And then you'd be the hero going to your employer and saying, hey, I can fix your problems. Here's this program. Check it out. As far as student loan deferments, I believe all student loans are deferred for 6 months if they're federal loans, and it's an automatic deferment with 0 interest. So that should kick in automatically. If not, you should check with your student loan provider and make sure they've done that if that's something that you want to have happen. So going into the small businesses, perhaps the most well-known program that's going on right now is this Paycheck Protection Program. So the Paycheck Protection Program is a loan from this SBA. The SBA generally gives loans to small businesses for a variety of reasons. The most common loan that people might know about is what's called an EIDL, an Emergency Injury Disaster Loan. It's a low interest loan that has a low collateral request, $25,000 for the collateral, that you have to repay the entire amount. And it's only available to you if you can't get any other line of credit. This Paycheck Protection Program is sort of an alternative for small businesses from using that loan. This loan is basically a low interest loan to cover payroll costs. Who's eligible? Small businesses, self-employed, contractors, and for the first time, 501c3 nonprofits. Now, this is really important because if you're running a masajid, if you're any kind of Muslim nonprofit, Corona is basically going to wipe out one of your main revenue sources, which is Ramadan, because there's a very strong chance that we're not doing congregational prayer in Ramadan and we're not fundraising in Ramadan. And then after Ramadan, a lot of times you have your fundraising dinner. There's a good chance that those dinners are not going to happen. So how do you keep your staff employed when your revenue source has been completely cut off? So one way is through this program. Another way is going back to what we said before, innovate or die. The old model of mass fundraising in these large venues is not a sustainable model. It never has been a sustainable model. It's something our community has to move away from at some point. We have to get more into peer-to-peer fundraising, more into relationship building, and having large donors fund your organization on a long term because they buy into your mission, and developing those relationships. That's what will be a sustained success for your nonprofit, not these one-off dinners and these one-off fundraising events. That being said, this program is available to nonprofits and something that you should look into. How do you get this loan? You're going to go to a bank. Whoever your lender is, they're the ones that work with the SBA to provide this. Some banks will have an online application. So for example, say you have a Chase business account. When you log into your Chase business account, you're going to see a link right there on the front saying you can log in here and you can apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. The amount that you can borrow, I've seen some different information about this. From the regulation, it appeared to be basically 2 times your payroll cost. And we'll talk about what payroll cost is in a moment, but 2 times your payroll cost plus 25% or plus 50%, somewhere in that ballpark. So that's the amount that you're allowed to borrow. The repayment terms, there's 1% interest. You make no payments for 6 months, repay it in 2 years. But the most important part about this is that it is eligible for loan forgiveness, which means if you use the funds properly, you do not have to pay back any of the principal. And as far as when you can apply for this, it's an application that's available now. It's been available all this past week. It is a first come, first serve basis, meaning that once the money that was allocated toward this program is used up, it doesn't matter if you qualify, you cannot get the funds. So you need to get to your bank and apply for this loan as soon as possible. And the application process runs from June 30th, 2020.
And I just wanted to jump in here and just say that when it comes to the application process, there's a few pointers that I wanted to give. So I actually, for our firm, I applied for this as well. And like Ausaf said, we simply went to the chase.com. There was a link, we applied. And there's certain things that you need to have ready in order to apply, right? And I just wanted to kind of throw this in there that for any non-for-profits or any small business owners or directors that are listening to this, this is going to show us why accounting is so important, right? So when it comes to our books, right, our financial statements, our profit loss statements, if we had somebody on, if we had a bookkeeper, an accountant that's been doing this for us, it makes this application process very, very simple. So much so that my accountant, Tabriz Ahmed, he actually sent me an email with the exact line items of what I need to put into the application, right? So for those of us who, maybe at the end of the year, we send our bank statements to our accountant and tell him to figure it out, this might be an opportunity for us to kind of peel things back and start a proper accounting process so that when it comes to these opportunities or opportunities in the future, that we have our financial statements in order. And I'm sure that Ausaf is going to address the issue about independent contractors and employers. So I'll wait for him to kind of get to that. And then I had a few things I wanted to say about that as well.
Yeah, and it's really important because time is of the essence. It's human nature that we start the application process and we get to a field or a question that asks a lot of accounting information. You don't have that information close to you. And we might just walk away from the application for a bit and say, well, I'll get back to this later. I can't deal with this right now. I'm doing 5 other things. Or you might just spend 5 hours trying to get that information. If you have everything ready, if your accountant's done this job properly, then that becomes a very easy hurdle to clear. So that's something that you just want to make sure that you have in your business as part of how you do business. So we talk about payroll costs. What does that mean? Because that's really important to this program. So a payroll cost is basically an accumulation of all of the salaries, wages, commissions, and tips you pay your employees. Each employee is capped at $100,000. So if they make $120,000, you can count $100,000 towards your payroll cost. You can't count the other 20 grand. Any employee benefits, that's sick pay, vacation pay, severance payments, health insurance payments, retirement benefits, whatever you're doing, those are part of your payroll cost. So you add those on too. And also your state and local taxes that you're paying on that compensation from your business, you add that on to your payroll costs. If you're a sole proprietor or independent contractor, self-employed, then basically just look at that cash earning that you're taking by yourself and look at that as your payroll cost. The important thing to understand here, though, is that if you pay a contractor, that cannot be part of your payroll cost. So if you have say you had a contractor work on a specific aspect of a particular project, that payment to that contractor is not part of your payroll, even though you could have technically had an employee do the same thing. But if they were 1099, you can't add them to your payroll costs. And that's something that's really important about thinking about how you classify your employees. So how do you calculate it? You get that number, that payroll cost. If you're an existing business, go the past 12 months or use 2019 as your model and divide that by 12, get your monthly payroll costs. If you're seasonal, you can look at a particular seasonal window, which is defined as February 15th or March 1st until June 30th. If you're a new business, look at your payroll costs from January 1st to the end of February. So that's how it's going to figure out what your monthly payroll cost is. And then on your loan application, you put that information in, and what you're eligible for is basically 2.5 times whatever that number is going to be. That's what your loan is going to come back to you.
And I just wanted to, jump in here when going back to the point about no payments to contractors. One of the biggest things that I see in my practice and the way that our community runs businesses is they tend not to even have payroll, right? What they end up doing is to avoid having payroll, they make everybody an independent contractor, even though they should be legally classified as an employee. So if you're a doctor and now you have an office manager and a nurse and all these people who are supposed to be your employees, and you've categorized them as independent contractors, you've lost out on this particular issue. Number two is that I know that people have heard previously that you can include 1099 costs. However, regulations came out on Monday to specifically say that 1099 workers will not be considered in what your payroll costs are. So, just as a pointer to our businesses and our non-for-profits is to properly classify our employees. An independent contractor is somebody who's doing a one-off job. If I'm hiring somebody to paint my office, that's a contractor. But if, as an attorney, I'm hiring a paralegal who's going to work full-time, they're an employee. They're not an independent contractor.
What are the other risks that occur when you classify someone wrong? Because you're right, a lot of people in our community do have basically full-time employees who are on 1099s. What happens if the employee has an issue with that?
So there's a number of things that can happen. Number one is that in Illinois, for example, we have something called the EIDL. So EIDL tends to do audits, and they can do an audit of your firm and realize that, okay, you're making so much revenue, but you have absolutely no payroll costs, and they will do a audit of your business, and they can go back and collect monies that you haven't paid by misclassifying an independent contractor, number one. Number two is that these independent contractors, even though you have an agreement between you and them that they are an independent contractor, that doesn't matter. They could still take advantage of the protections in the laws that protect employees. So there could still be wage claims against you. There could be discrimination claims against you. So don't think just by simply having a contract between you and this person that they're an independent contractor, that they can't sue you for wages, for discrimination, and everything else that an employee could.
All right, so that's something really important for all of us to kind of memorialize in our minds. If this event is what wakes us up to the idea of proper classification of employees, then hopefully that will help benefit us in the future. We want to keep that in mind, that we have to classify our employees properly. So going forward into that really important point on this program, loan forgiveness. So obviously that's the catch that gets everyone interested, that I can get money to pay my payroll and I can have that loan forgiven. So how does it get forgiven? It's pretty simple. The purpose of the loan is to pay your payroll. So use the loan to pay your payroll. And that's kind of the simplest way I can put it. So basically you can use the fund for payroll costs. You can use the funds to pay your rent for your business as long as that agreement was in place prior. Same with utilities, as long as the service was already there. Same with interest on a mortgage, provided that mortgage was already there. It's got to be paid out within 8 weeks of receiving those funds. So you receive those funds on April 30th. You've got to pay it out over the next 8 weeks. You can't just, kind of pay payroll slowly for the course of 20 weeks and have it all forgiven. It's got to be paid out during that time. 75% of that loan has to be used towards those payroll costs. So only 25% is eligible to be used for rent, utilities, mortgage interest. Another thing to keep in mind is that the purpose of the loan is to keep your workforce the same, earning the same. So if you reduce your full-time staff, or you've already reduced your full-time staff, that might reduce the amount that's forgiven. On top of that, if you reduce salaries, that might reduce the amount of the loan that's forgiven. But you have until June 30th of this year to get your number of employees and your salaries back to what they were prior to these events occurring. And that's part of the loan application process, is to put that information and data in there, so that sets a standard by which you have to restore your business by June 30th in order to be eligible for the full loan forgiveness. So these are the things you want to keep in mind, that if you want to take these funds and have it forgiven and not have to pay back the principal, you need to follow these guidelines. If you don't follow these guidelines, then there's going to be a portion of that loan that you have to repay on the principal.
Yeah, and as a practical note as well, this kind of goes back to accounting as well. What I'm recommending is, actually to create a new account, right? So if you have a operating account that you typically pay all of your expenses through, what I'm recommending is that if you get this money, to take that money and place it into another account, and now have your payroll, your rent, your utilities, and whatever else is applicable with this loan paid out of that account. Because at the end of this term, you have to prove to your lender that you actually use these funds for payroll, rent, etc. So by having a separate account, it just makes it very simple, and you can simply print out your bank statements to show the bank how you used it. The other option is, if you're using a bookkeeper, to have them account for it separately to make it easy for you to prove that you've used these funds properly.
And you want to do these things in advance. I mean, I have a brother I was working with, and I was trying to help him distinguish his personal and his business accounts, because he basically intermingled everything. Everything's under his name, and everything is completely commingled. And the problem with that is it's a massive accounting issue. And if you're going through kind of litigation, there's a really big question as to what's your personal income, what's your business revenue income. There's a lot of problems there. And, he kept saying to me, well, I can separate all these things, but it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of time. And I would look at him and I would say, brother, you're sitting with me for hours now on the back end trying to unwind this. Had you spent a couple hours on the front end, restructuring where the payments come from, changing your card numbers, it's a hassle for sure, but it's going to save you months on the back end. So even if it feels like it's going to be a lot of work, the work is worth it. If it makes everything else simpler, if it helps you get this loan forgiveness at the end of the day, you want to put in the work. Nothing comes to those who don't put the work in.
Yeah, and actually that brings up another good topic, is about, the reason that we create businesses is to shield ourselves individually from liability, right? And so there's a concept called piercing the corporate veil. And what can end up happening is that if you commingle your personal expenses and your business expenses, it's not necessarily in line with the loan forgiveness, but it goes to the point that Ausaf's bringing up, is that if you are commingling your personal expenses with your business expenses, and if you get sued, or if the business gets sued, there's a possibility that you as an individual could become liable, because now you are treating this company as if it's your own personal bank account. And it's possible that somebody who's suing you can pierce the veil of the corporation, the shield that the corporation is giving you, and get to you as an individual. So this accounting stuff, I know I'm bringing it up over and over again, but it is just so important.
Let me just ask a follow-up question, because this is very interesting. So my assumption is that if you want to go into business, you form an LLC for one reason, is to get that level of protection. But in the experience that you guys have, is this an issue of ignorance, laziness, or do people think that they're going to somehow get an added advantage? Is this why they mingle funds normally? What's the primary reason people fall into that?
Sure. I mean, from my perspective, I think it's a systemic issue, right? Number one is, ignorance, yes, that by creating a business, you are, according to the Supreme Court, creating a new person, okay? And this new person needs to have their own account. They need to have their own dealings, and you need to run this business on its own. And as a business owner, you should only take money from there kind of like a salary or as a distribution, right? So I do think that it's a little bit of ignorance. I think it's also laziness, because what ends up happening is that people are not on top of their revenue, and they're not on top of their expenses. So what ends up happening in the middle of the month is they run out of money on the personal side, or they run out of money on the business side, because they haven't projected, they haven't kept track of these things. And now, because of their laziness, they have to dip in and dip out from that business account. So I think those are the primary reasons why, people don't understand that you have to keep business and personal separate.
And Ausaf, have you ever seen this work to somebody's advantage? So you mentioned the example of people spend hours and hours with you afterwards. I think we lost him. So Naveed, or let me add him back in.
Yeah.
Okay. Ausaf, can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry about that.
All good, all good. So have you ever experienced? So you gave the example of at the end, somebody comes to you trying to fix these issues, and obviously they're having to pay you, they're having to spend hours with you. But have you? I'm asking such a simple question, but I'm asking for a reason so the viewers can understand that planning is always in their favor. Is there any time where you experienced someone who takes these shortcuts and wins?
As long as you never hit a speed bump in your life. I mean, that's the reality of it, is that if nobody ever looks at your situation and you manage to skirt on by, that'd be one thing. But here's the reality, so when I would practice, my primary area of practice was divorce. And if you have your personal account and your business account mixed with a divorce, now your business revenue becomes your personal income. And anybody knows anything about business is that your revenue is not your income. Your revenue is a much higher number than your actual income. And it becomes a really nasty situation very quickly. But there are so many ramifications from doing something like that. From my perspective now, if we're talking about from growing your business, if you've intermingled everything, how are you going to figure out what your revenue stream is? How are you going to understand your cash flow? If you're running, if your business is paying for, you and your wife going out to eat, how are you going to understand what is your actual cost for meetings and what you're taking home personally? And that's going to inhibit your ability to grow. So even if you never get caught up in a situation where there's some sort of legal ramification for what you're doing, you're not going to be effective in your business because you're not going to have the numbers and the information to make real-time decisions. And when that situation gets inhibited, then that's going to hurt you in the long run. So that's even getting away from, well, this bad thing could happen, that bad thing could happen. By mixing everything together, there's a lot of good things that don't happen also.
Thank you guys for that explanation.
All right, so let me get back into the PowerPoint. All right, so going on to the next program, which is called the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan Emergency Advance. So what this is I had mentioned the EIDL loan. This is an advance, which is basically termed as a grant. It's a very simple concept to explain. Basically, if you're a small business, 501c3 nonprofit, self-employed contractor, you can go on the SBA website, look up this particular term, go to that page, and you can apply right through the SBA. You can basically take up to $10,000. It's supposed to be a grant, not a loan. So it's an advance. You get the funds, and there's no need to repay them. There isn't a whole lot of guidance on what you can or can't use the funds for because it's considered a grant. But at the same time, I believe what the SBA's expectation is that you're using to sustain your business during this time. So you can apply for this along with the PPP program. And there's really no reason not to have done it. I would encourage everyone who qualifies in terms of being eligible to just go onto the SBA website, go through the application process. It does not take long. It won't take you more than 30 minutes as long as you have your numbers together, and submit the application through the SBA and put your name in the queue for this money, because this is essentially free money to help your business keep on going during this difficult time. So the next two loans or the next two benefits from the SBA, they're a little bit different. This one is not going to apply to everybody. Basically, you already have to have an existing relationship with the SBA. And say you decide, well, I need a large loan. The PPP program is not going to cut it. The advance is not going to cut it. I'm in a bad situation. I need the full emergency disaster loan. I need that. So you go ahead and you apply for that loan. Through this bridge loan program, you can quickly get $25,000 direct cash infusion into your business while the actual loan application is being processed. And then when the actual loan will disperse, it'll pay back the $25,000. So it's a loan. There's no forgiveness for this. It's just a method by which you can get a quick cash infusion if you've already got an existing relationship with the SBA. And the last option the SBA is given is that the SBA has a whole slew of other loans that aren't related to emergencies. They have 7A loans, they have 504 loans and micro loans. So if you've already got one of these loans, they're going to make the payments for the next 6 months. And if you're trying to get a loan, one of these loans, then they're also going to make the payments on these loans for a period of time. So one thing that I would encourage you is that if you have ever thought about using these loans for your business, now might be the time to apply. For example, a 504 loan, it's essentially used to buy commercial property, commercial real property. So if you've been thinking about buying a building to house your business in, maybe it's time to look at the 504 loan, because there is a benefit in terms of the SBA paying portions of that loan. Also, the interest rates are far lower right now. So this is an opportunity here. You know, we're in a bad situation, but there's an opportunity presented here. The other thing you want to keep in mind is that this stimulus package is the first. It might be the only, but considering how things are going, considering how slow the reaction of this country was to this virus, it's very possible that we need more to fix our economy. So this loan says this benefit says 6 months. Now, maybe 3 months down the line, they issue another act, and that act extends this for 1 year. So if you get into this queue, you might be getting a larger benefit in the long run. So you want to be aware of that, and you want to try to take advantage of it if it fits your business needs. So that just takes a little bit of research, going to the SBA website and going through these things, or if you need help, then talking to a qualified professional that can help walk you through what options are available for your business. So there's a couple of other things that are available that are basically tax credits. So there's another act that was passed that was separate from the COVID stimulus package, which was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which basically says that any employer that's going to pay sick and family leave to employees that have to go for a COVID-19 related reason, they get a dollar for dollar tax credit reimbursement at the end of the year. So for those employers who do have employees in a bad situation, you should be able to provide them that leave and engender yourself of their loyalty and you being there for them in their time of need, without believing there's going to be some significant risk coming back to you, because the government's going to give you a tax credit for that. And I'll go on to this final page, a number of other tax credits that are available for businesses trying to cope with the situation. So I wanted to point out the first aspect of this page. The employers can make a payment towards your employee student loans tax-free. This is something that you can take advantage of as helping you and your employee out. Because if you have an employee and that employee earns a certain salary, it's possible for you to take a portion of that salary and make it as a payment towards their student loan and not have to worry about payroll tax on that. Whereas the student, the employee is able to take that income in and use it for their student loan without having to pay taxes on it. So you both can benefit from it if you both collaborate together on that. So these are some of the other IRS tax benefits that are right now available. If we're going to look at tax filings for the future years as a result of this, and your accountant can be able to guide you better on these things. And I'd imagine there might be more changes to this as it goes on. So for the business side, these are the things to consider. Like I said, there are other aspects. For example, in Illinois, if you have a business outside of Chicago city lines, there are small business loans available for you through the Illinois Small Business Association. There were some grants that Illinois was giving out, but those grant deadlines have already passed. So if you didn't apply for those, you can no longer get those. But you do want to keep yourself apprised of what may become available in the future. The key takeaway here is that these things are available until they're not. The sooner you apply, the better chance you have of getting them. So have your books in order, have your business in order, and keep up to date on the information. And as long as you do that, then when these things become available, get in the front of the line, because that's the way it's going to guarantee that you actually can get these benefits, as opposed to waiting on the sidelines until everything passes. So going into what's available for individuals. So we talked about the student loan deferment. We talked about knowing everything I just mentioned in terms of interacting with your own employer. Your employer tells you, well, I can't pay you. And you tell your employer, well, didn't you apply for the PPP program because then you could pay me, right? The big thing we haven't talked about yet, though, for individuals is the unemployment benefits. So if you're on unemployment now, you should automatically start receiving an additional $600 per week. Your unemployment benefits are extended for 13 weeks. And there's also increased eligibility for those who can get unemployment. So ordinarily, if you quit your job, you cannot get unemployment. But if there was a valid concern regarding COVID-19 and your employer was not taking steps to address your concerns, you may still be eligible for unemployment. So you still want to apply and go through the process. If you left your job because you contracted COVID-19 or a family member contracted COVID-19 and you may have been a risk to others, then you may still be eligible for unemployment. If you left your job because your children are home from school and there's no one to take care of them, you may still be eligible for unemployment. So if you fall into those classes of people, make sure you go to the IDES, the Illinois Department of Employment Security, and you start the application process as soon as possible, because that's how you get these benefits. And even if you don't end up qualifying, you're not wasting a lot of time. If you're at home, if you're dealing with these situations, there is no harm in getting in line and getting this done. So the Act also allows for sole proprietors, self-employed, and contractors to be eligible for unemployment for the first time. Usually, if you are one of these categories, you could not get unemployment, but now you can. The one thing that I would note, though, is that the IDES still has not figured out how they're going to do this. So if you go on their website, they're going to just tell you, you got to wait till we figure out how we're going to do it. We haven't figured out how we're going to roll this program out for these individuals. So you can't apply for it right now, but it's something to keep in mind. It's something to keep checking back on to figure out when they roll out how this program will work and how you, being self-employed or a contractor, can get these funds.
Yeah, the other thing to kind of understand here is that what we're talking about is this is the federal level benefits that we're talking about. The federal government is telling the states now that these are the people who are eligible. However, your particular state, and I know we were referring to IDES because we're both from Illinois, but for those of you who are tuning in from other states, each state might have additional benefits, right? So for example, in Illinois, and I don't think Illinois has come out with how they're going to actually do this, but even if you've been looking for part-time work and you've been employed in the last 12 to 18 months, you might also be eligible for unemployment benefits. So make sure you check your local Department of Employment Security. It's called IDES in Illinois. It might be called something different in your state, but keep apprised of that and realize that there might be additional benefits that your state is giving you that's not actually covered under the federal law.
And this is the contact information for both you brothers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you guys can contact Ausaf at MyShura.com, Ausaf at MyShura.com, and Naveed at Farooqi.Husain.com. And his website is www.farooqihusain.com. So, brothers, we got time for a couple questions?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So you guys kind of gave us some valuable insight, mashallah, in a particular category, and that is in our community. There are probably a lot of individuals who are taking certain liabilities, right? In the sense that maybe they don't have their paperwork in order or they don't have their books in order. So is it appropriate to assume that people with very small businesses are probably operating as independent contractors and they probably don't have their business bank account set up correctly?
I mean, I think it's possible. I think the terminology, I just want to make sure that we're using the right terminology, right? So like if you have your own business, yes, you would be an independent contractor for other businesses or for other people. However, you as a business, like even if you're a plumber and you're going to people's houses as a plumber, you are their independent contractor. However, you as yourself, you are still a business, right? You could be a business of one, and you as an individual should still have, the separation between your personal and business. You should still have profit and loss statement, a balance sheet, and a ledger, and all of that. So just because you are a one-man show doesn't mean you're not a business, right? And you should still hold yourself to the standard of, a Fortune 500 company in that sense. And going to Ausaf's point that he mentioned before is, in order for you to grow from a one-man show to, a multi-employee firm, you need to have these things in order so that you know how to project and plan for the next step.
But let's assume that even the plumber example that you gave, right? So someone's going around and he's doing plumbing, but if he does not have an LLC open, which I mean, is that number one? Is that okay? Not having an LLC. So I understand it offers that protection, but at this moment, what can that person do?
Yeah. So Ausaf mentioned on one of the payroll costs. So as a sole proprietor, you can still apply for the PPP, right? And so essentially you would have to show your books the way that you're going to show your books, or show your income and costs and all of that. But as a sole proprietor, you can still apply for the PPP.
Awesome.
Yeah. So all the programs, I mean, so basically, if you're an independent contractor or a sole proprietor or a, just a, I forgot, self-employed, right? So if you're one of those three things, or maybe all three at once, you can apply for the PPP program, the EIDL program, and unemployment. You can apply for all three. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that say you get the PPP program, you get the check for that, and you apply for unemployment. You got to pay yourself, which you have to report to unemployment, which is going to reduce your unemployment benefit. If you don't pay yourself and you put the money to the side, then you got to pay that money back because you're not paying your payroll costs. So you're not going to get away with grabbing every program. So you can apply for whatever it is and use what you can use. But I think the big thing to kind of take away from this is that this should be kind of be the wake up call for everybody. That, I want to start a business. Let me sit down with someone like Naveed. Help me with my incorporation documents. Help me with my operating agreement. Tell me what I got to do from the legal side of things. All right, I want to grow my business. I want to make sure I'm doing my business right. Let me sit down with somebody like MyShura and see what ways that my business can benefit and grow, and how healthy is my business actually in terms of the numbers. That's the name of the company is MyShura, because you're supposed to seek out shura, seek out advice from people, seek out professionals that can help you. That's what we're here for. And that's what we want to encourage people to do. And that's part of the reason why we've always done these education seminars, is just we want to educate the community, get more savvy about these things, because the more wealth we have in the community, more our businesses succeed, then that's better for all of us. That's better for future generations. That's better for dawah. That's better for every aspect of our deen, is us being successful. And we can't do it alone. We got to work together to do that.
Thank you for that reminder. We got one more question that came in through Facebook. I'm going to bring it up on the screen. One question: even though for the SBA loan, the principal amount does not need to be returned if the conditions are met, but one still has to pay interest on it, correct?
That is correct. So there's a 1% interest rate that's on the loan. So if you get the loan forgiven, so say you get $100,000 from the loan, that loan will start to accrue interest. Payments aren't due for 6 months, but the interest does start to accrue. So you might get the $100,000 forgiven, but you may still owe a few $100s on interest payments after that. So you'll have to make those payments.
Okay, so I'm going to leave the floor open for you, brothers. You can give us your final words, final advices, and then we'll wrap up the program. Naveed, we can start with you.
Sure. So first of all, thank you, Imran and A Continuous Charity for having us. I think that this is a really important program. And even though we were kind of addressing the stimulus package, I think at the same time, this was kind of a business consultation, right? From both myself and Ausaf, even though, I have to make the disclaimer that you're not my client and this is not legal advice and all of that, but just general information about how to run your business. I think Ausaf and I are both here to, help our community be successful from the legal side, from the business side, and every other side. And so, keep us in mind for your future needs. If you have any questions, follow up, please let us know. And so that's really about it from me. One last thing is that we do have an estate planning seminar that we're holding tomorrow at 2 p.m. on Facebook Live for those of you who missed the beginning of the program. So there, myself and Ausaf, we're going to be speaking about estate planning, but not really only the legal technical side of estate planning, but really kind of how estate planning, making a will, hooks on to Islamic law, right? Because there is a struggle between Islamic law and American law as it relates to estate planning. And I think Ausaf and I have both seen kind of the struggles that Muslims have in that regard. So, it's going to be a broader discussion, and I think it'll be pretty interesting.
What's the Facebook channel again, so everyone can tune in at 2 o'clock?
So it's Farooqi Husain, FAROOQI HUSAIN.
Okay, and Ausaf, your final word, please.
Sure. Again, I agree with Naveed. Thank you for having this program. Thank you for the invitation to come on this and share this information. Inshallah, I hope it's a benefit for all of us. I think one thing I want to encourage everyone is keep your head up. In this situation, in these calamities, there is hardship, but there's also ease. There's opportunity. Don't catastrophize this situation in your head. Don't think the sky is falling down. And if you need help, you need someone to talk to, from the legal side, you have Naveed. From the business side, from just general growth and development, you can call me. Talk to your local counselors, your imams, whoever you need to. You're not alone. We might feel like we're alone because we're in our own homes, but we're not. So reach out as you need to. I also would echo Naveed's sentiment. I encourage you to tune into the estate planning seminar tomorrow. The one last anecdote I'll leave with is that when I started my legal career back in 2010, one of my first cases was a probate case, which is basically the court process when someone passes away. Started in 2011. The individual, the case started, and we were hired. That case did not resolve during my legal career. When I left, that case was still going on 10 years. That litigation has continued to go on. So what Naveed has to say is really important for all of us, inshallah. So definitely make the time to tune in and talk about that. And thank you again for having us.
No, I want to thank you guys. You guys did an excellent, phenomenal job at explaining this process. I myself was very confused on how to even start this process, and you made it very clear in terms of the different loans in the grant and the websites and how easy it is. It's whether it's a 30-minute process and what have you. So I took a lot of notes even for myself, and I'm confident that for those of you who are watching this, you benefited. If you're not going to watch this or you haven't had time today, we're going to share this on our newsletter and we'll share it on our website. So please check us out at acceducate.org. Once again, ACC Educate, a continuous charity. We give out interest-free loans to college students who want to pursue their higher educational dreams. Obviously, so in a clear manner, if you take $20,000 from us, all you return to us is $20,000, not $20,000 and one penny, not $22,000. It's just $20,000. And at this time, we're all at home. We have time to reflect. We have time to make this negative into a positive. But I don't want people to forget about the power of education, because even the benefit you guys provided us today is because of your background, because of your experience, your educational experience as well. So again, thank you for making the time and benefiting our listeners and our subscribers. And I myself will tune in for your show tomorrow. So until next time, brothers and sisters, thank you for listening, and see you guys soon. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.